This is our March 3rd, 2022 Design Review Committee meeting. Up on the agenda tonight is 92, 96, and 104 Waldemar Avenue. This is a proposal to raise the existing structures and erect 3 new residential structures, each with 5 units and 5 parking spaces. And you're welcome to start presenting whenever you like. Or
you guys going to show the proposal, or you want me to share?
Whatever works for you.
Okay, I'll pull it up. That's even easier. Sure. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Cool. That leaves my hands free to take notes on stuff too. Thank you.
Great. Can you see that, Tony? Okay.
Yep.
And I can make that full screen if that's even better. There we go. So great. Thanks to the group for having us here for the project at 92, 96, and 104 Waldemar Ave. My name's Jeff Drago. I know I've worked with the group in the past with Drago and Toscano. We're handling the zoning and permitting on the project. With me, so the developers and the applicants, Josh and Ricky Crespo. Crespo Construction and their company, the developers on the project. They're a local East Boston developer. They have a number of projects going on in the area all over East Boston. They've completed a bunch. They have some under construction, and they're also local residents. They live in East Boston. So we find that as projects start to move forward, it's easy to get in touch with them, to talk to them, and they're always available to listen to neighbors and abutters' concerns as projects go forward. What you're looking at in this rendering are the 3 separate buildings. Oh, and also, I don't know if he's on yet, but Eric Zackerson from Context is the architect on the project as well. What you're looking at is 3 separate buildings, and as was mentioned in the original proposal, is that these are all going to house 5 units right now, they're proposed. But we broke it down not to be just one large box or sort of a large structure, but to have 3 separate buildings that look similar to a 3-unit building that you would find in the area with pitched roof and different colors and design as we put this out there. We also are proposing shared driveways where the parking would go in the back underneath the building, but in the rear. Right now, I'm going to show you site pictures. There are 3 existing outdated 1-family structures that are there now. So those buildings would be raised in this proposal, and these 3 buildings would replace them. So again, that's our team, which I already went over. And again, here's the formal proposal. So it's to erect 3 new residential buildings. These would be condominium units inside, 5 parking spaces on 3 separate lots. All of those lots are 3,800, so we're slightly under 12,000 square feet of overall lot coverage for the 3 combined. We are proposing 15 units, which means as part of this project, we would have inclusionary affordable housing on site. Which and being at 15 units, not only does that allow us to do that, that is also mandated by the BPDA as well. And it's something that the developers would like to have as part of this project. What we show here is the BPDA map. So obviously these are the 3 existing lots that we're proposing. Directly across from us is the Suffolk Downs, or is Suffolk Downs, and is part of their development proposal. So we're right across from that. There are there's a 3-family to the right of us. There's a 1-family to the left of us. I know there's a project being proposed to the left of that. The housing development as you go a little bit further, a number of 1s, some 3s, and an apartment complex directly diagonal from us. So even though this is a 1F 4,000 district, there is sort of an array of different projects in the area, as everyone knows.
Hold on,
It's
bud.
just an aerial view. Oh, Eric, good. Okay, this is just an aerial view of the with a red highlight area of the general area, just so folks can see sort of the mix of housing stock. That is just the Suffolk Downs proposal. As you go a little bit further down the street, this is the housing development at the corner of at 160 Waldemar Ave. And then again, this is our neighbor across the street, so 75 Waldemar Ave. At the corner, you've got 16 Waldemar and 5 Waldemar. So you can just see there are larger buildings. This is not what we were trying to mirror this as. We were looking for these individual structures broken up with the pitched roof to give it the feel that would blend in one of these streets. That's the larger development, obviously, as you come around the bend. These are existing conditions. So you can see, and I'm going to show you all of our lots, but these are the structures for the dated structures on the left, directly across from Suffolk Downs and the residential housing across from us. These are the buildings on the right-hand side, looking in the opposite direction down the street. And as you can see also, there's some really old and street trees that don't even look healthy. So as part of this project too, we would also want to plant new street trees, and Josh and Ricky have been working with the nonprofit in East Boston to start adopting or putting in trees at all of their new projects where they're able to. So in here, we definitely would want to do that. And as right now, that's across from us, so you can see. But this is looking directly at the project. So the 3 structures are 1, 2, and 3 right here. And you can see there's a lot of curb cut, just cut right here, sort of dead space that isn't used. What this will allow is we are going to have our entrances at the front of the buildings, but they're going to be much smaller. So we're actually going to be able to close a number of these curb cuts and restore parking spaces in front, but also, be able to do our sidewalks over and also add the street trees, hopefully, as well. These are just some massing pictures here that Eric had drawn. So this just is showing the individual buildings, how he broke these up at 92, 96, and 104. And it shows you the front of the buildings with the bump outs, with some nice decks in front as well for folks to use, or terraces. This is the zoning comp chart. So if this project was to move forward, we would be required to go to the Boston Zoning Board of Appeal for a number of variances. And just to go over those briefly, obviously we are in a 1F district. We are proposing 5 units per building, so we would trigger a use variance. Our lot sizes are at 3,800. We would be required to have 4,000, so we're slightly under. Our lot width we meet, and our lot frontage we would require an FAR variance. 0.5 is what's allowed, or at 1.53. And our height also, so it is 35 feet, 2.5 stories. We're proposing 3 stories at 39 feet. There is no outdoor open space requirement. We will have a setback 5 feet in the rear for some green space, but we'd also be putting decks to increase that at this point right now as well. Our front is modal, but we would be required to have a front yard variance. Our side yard varies. In some areas it's 3, and some it's 7, so that would require a variance. I mentioned the rear yard being 5. 35 is what would be required under the code, so we would require a rear yard variance. And even though we are at a 1-for-1 parking, so I don't know if I mentioned that, so we would have 5 dedicated parking spaces for each of the 3 buildings, so that's 15 total. And we'd also be restoring some of those curb cuts, and that would also bring additional public parking that isn't able to be used now. And these are just our site plans, so you can see where the shared driveway, so we would have 2 curb cuts. Right now, there's that one massive one that goes the whole length of this building. And then there's another one on the left-hand side, so we would be closing those. We would have 1 curb cut For these two buildings, it would be a shared driveway that you would park underneath the buildings. And then on the right-hand side would have its own separate driveway that would lead to the back. Eric, I think you're on. I'm gonna turn over to you so you can go over your plans, and you just let me know when you want me to change the slides, if that's okay.
Thank you. That's great. So each of the three buildings has a pretty similar configuration. We'll walk through this one in particular, and I'll kind of just show you how the building would function. At the top of this, you see half of the driveway that it shares with its neighbor. So don't be deceived into thinking that we're trying to get away with a 6-foot driveway. That's actually just 6 feet of it is on our side, and 6 feet of it is on the next door building, the one adjacent to it. So at the top of the page here, or at the right is Waldemar. At the top of the page would be the driveway. And as you can see, a vehicle could drive to the back, and there would be 5 garage spaces in the back here, one dedicated to each unit. And then the rest of the building, the rest of the first floor is this first floor, about 930 square foot, 2-bed, 2-bath unit. The idea of this is that we get an active unit right on the street. This one is Group 1 accessible. It's convenient for a person with mobility issues, and it's a Group 1 unit is required. So I don't want to take too much credit for it, but that's how we meet that requirement, and we provide that unit right on the street. And then up above on the next slide, I'm pretty sure in the next slide you'll see this is what happens on the 2nd and 3rd floor. We've got 2 units. You come up the stairs. There are 2 doors side by side. Both of them open into an open living kitchen zone, and both of them have 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms kind of tucked away from that. So the rear unit has 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms all the way at the back of the building. The front one has 1 bedroom in the corner, the front corner, and the primary ensuite bedroom tucked about them in the middle of this the building. There's in the rear between the buildings, facing only each other, are these the decks that serve the rear units. We wanted to kind of create some outdoor space, and we have an opportunity, but given some discussions we've had on other projects, we wanted to make sure that these decks really just faced each other and didn't face the neighbors too much. So we have this deck for what we call Unit 3 on the back that would face our other building. And then the front unit has a much smaller deck, but again, we put that right at the front of right towards the front of the property, so that it would feel more like a kind of porch setting, something that would be out there and not necessarily facing some of our rear neighbors who we've heard have some concerns about privacy. So we wanted to show that the open space that we think is really critical for people right now, but also just the general configuration. The next, and again, these are right in the neighborhood of 1,000 square feet each, 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom. And so this is the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor will look very similar. If you could flip to that. Yeah, very similar, 2 bedroom, 2 bath, each with a deck, outdoor space, and each right around 1,000 square feet. Next slide. And this is the building section. On the left here is Waldemar, how you would enter and be confronted with a choice of going into the unit, Unit 1 on the lower left. Above that would be Unit 2 and 3, and above that Unit 4 and 5. And the lower right-hand portion of the building is the 5-car garage that we had mentioned earlier. Next slide. And the other thing to kind of keep in mind, I'm sure everybody who's familiar with Waldemar knows that the ground slopes quite a bit. And so what we're going to have to do is excavate around in the area around the garage and the driveway. What that effectively does is it makes the front of the building, which is going to be 3 stories plus the gable, makes the rear of the building 2 stories plus the gable, and that's because by that point the garage is at least completely submerged underground.
Right.
Next slide. And then I think all three buildings are going to function very similarly. I should say, I think all three buildings are going to function very similarly. Here you see that, and we wanted them to not feel too much like the same design. There's quite a bit of differentiation, variation along Waldemar, and we want to respect that. There's also a language of sloped roofs, front porches, balconies. We wanted to respect that and use those for the wonderful function that they can have. So all three of these buildings have those gable roofs, have the outdoor open space, and a couple of them like this one have it on the front of the building like some of our neighbors. Next slide. And then this is the third one, similarly mirrored functionally inside, very similar, 5 units, 5 garage spaces, but has the 3 decks on the front, has the 2 decks kind of on the side facing its neighbors. Just a variation in order to help kind of keep it from being kind of monotonous as some buildings on this street have been developed previously. We wanted to avoid that. We wanted to appreciate the variation that occurs along Waldemar. Next slide. Left elevation. I think this is pretty helpful for people who, know it slopes, but may not realize that it slopes an entire story over the course from the right side of the building, which is Waldemar, to the left side, which is facing our adjacent abutter to the rear. Next slide. Similarly, looking at 104 Waldemar, and this is kind of the view that you're going to get from the rear balconies, is kind of facing our building and trying not to impose or draw too much attention from some of the neighbors. That's why we don't have those rear decks. Slide. And then a couple of renderings showing how these 3 buildings fit into along Waldemar. The one on the left is looking out towards the highway, and the one on the right is looking in towards the East Boston.
Thanks.
That's it.
And I think just looking at, this final rendering, you can see that many of the houses are actually elevated. So even though, like this one on the left, it is a 3, but it's pretty close in height to where we are as well, just because a lot of these houses just function with stairs in front. Ours, because they're all accessible, would have those ground level units that you could just go right into. So we don't have that elevation in the front. Not that they're not higher, our buildings are definitely higher. But, we just want to point that out. We can answer any questions that folks have. Thanks.
Thank you. If anyone wants to ask a question, you can feel free to unmute or raise your hand. You can also use the chat feature. Oh, looks like Gail's raising her hand.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the rear yard. What is that? What is the distance between the building and the property line?
So, Eric, I don't know if we're 5 feet in the rear from the back property line. So we have a 5-foot rear setback from the back. But because of the slope, if you were in the back, it's not from the house in the back, it's from the property line in the back. And so but because of the grading, if you were in the back, it would appear as a 2-story building because 1 story is submerged underground.
So your house is going to be 5 feet from the property line?
Yes.
Correct.
And the requirement is 35 feet?
Correct.
Yeah, that's really, I think, very imposing, and I think you're destroying the sight lines of all the other properties. So now they're going to look out to a chock-a-block view, and the sight lines in the rear and the front are done for a purpose. So I personally have a particular problem with you, or any developer going out to the max. It's just, I think it's just disrespectful to all your abutters. And I'll have other questions, but I'll share my time, obviously, with people. Does no one have it?
Looks like we have a comment from Diane DiGiacomo in the chat saying, again, these structures are ginormous. This is not going to work for our neighborhood. As a property owner a few doors down, I and my butters will oppose.
And just to respond to that, I don't know if Diane is talking about the height or just massing. I mean, we tried to break this up for the appearance that these would be laid out like 3-unit buildings with pitched roof. Obviously, we have some wiggle room to play with height, but right now we're at an average of 39 feet. And we can, obviously, some of the buildings a little higher, but the allowable height for the area is 35 feet. So, even no matter what, even if we were at 35, they are larger than some of the buildings in that immediate area because some of them are very small in terms of height, but the code does allow for 35. So just to point out.
We have a question from Dave asking, what will a unit be priced at?
I would turn that over to Josh or Ricky if they have an idea.
For pricing, we're going to work with our real estate team. So we haven't had that ID'd yet, but that is a good question. I'll connect with them and I'll share that with Jeff just to make sure that we get that addressed at the next meeting.
I have a question about what is currently on the lot by way of trees in the back.
Do you guys know, I'm sorry, Gail, what's currently on the lot? I know there's some trees in front, but are there any trees in the rear? I don't know, Eric, on your site plan, if you saw any trees or healthy trees or.
Can you show us that first slide?
Sure.
A Google slide?
Yeah. Josh, do you know by chance what's currently on the site or if there's trees?
On the top of my head, I'm not sure if there are any trees in the rear, but we definitely understand the importance of trees. In East Boston, I know it's shrinking the amount of trees. So for any trees that are in the rear, if we're not able to keep them, we'd replant a tree further in the rear just to make sure that we are maintaining that, as well as add street trees in front of the property.
Did you show me that Google Doc or Google site? That one. Yep. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Back up. Yeah, right there. That might show something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, there could be a few in the way back. We'll find out. We'll do a tree inventory, Gail.
Yeah. And is there going to be grass planted in the back, or is that going to be asphalted?
So there would be grass beyond the building, correct. Now, again, obviously this is a first iteration, but yes, we're proposing grass in the back. Green space.
On the entire site in the rear?
I'm sorry?
On the entire sites in the rear?
In the rear, yes, yeah. So functionable, usable space for the owners.
Well, are you gonna put like concrete decking or like first floor, like a platform out there?
You mean when you come out? Yeah, so probably right when you would come out of the, in the back, but there would be grass because the parking is actually underneath, so it's underground. So in the back, we would have an area to have grass and plantings. And we can certainly put a landscape design once this gets a little bit further.
I think Diane had a question about the frontal zoning, frontal variance.
So you mean the front of the, so we would line up, we would be modal with the other buildings. That's the goal. But your front yard required would be 15, but when you look at those houses, none of them are set 15 feet back. So it's pretty common to line up with the other buildings, which is what you would want for continuity.
We had another comment from Jane Biagiotti saying Tree Eastie is concerned about heat islands, which are created by lack of trees and green space. You are taking away 30 feet of ground space and concern about water runoff.
Not sure what she means taking up. So these gentlemen actually met with Tree Eastie and have been committing to plant new street trees on projects. In terms of water runoff, part of this process would involve full engineering water and sewer plans. They would have to be approved by the Boston Water and Sewer Department, designed by their engineer, our engineer, to give to them. And then we would not be able to pull a permit if this was approved until that met all of their requirements. So the drainage system that they would actually be required to put in, catch basin, piping, all of that, would actually be better than what's there now, because these buildings were built so long ago.
If no one has a question, I'll ask another question.
There's one in the chat if you don't mind.
Yep.
Joanne had asked, Joanne Mahoney, if you reduced the size by the back 2 units, how would that affect the rear setback and FAR? The FAR is currently triple current, and that is excessive.
So I guess if she's saying if we took off 2 units, I'm just not sure. I mean, again, I don't.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Jeff, I'm saying, what if you reduced the size by your total 5 units currently, brought it down to 3 units per building, so you have a total of 9 units on the project? How would that affect the setback in the rear, and how would it affect the FAR? Because going from zoning in a 1-family neighborhood to this 0.5 FAR to 1.53, the math is simple. It's 3 times the size currently. So where's the compromise? You're proposing 5. If you did 3, what if scenario? Can you answer that?
Well, I can't tell you because I don't, we haven't calculated that. We have to see how that would work out, but it would definitely go down. I can tell you, depending on where we reduce units from, it would increase the rear setback. Again, there's a formula, obviously, when you add that in, that we would come back with, but it would reduce the FAR, certainly. I know you mentioned it is a 1F 4,000 area. I'm not disputing that, but to the left of us is a 3-unit building. There's an apartment complex diagonal from us. So at some point, during the years, the zoning code was already violated. Somebody went and got approved for variances. So it's not unheard of for the area. I'm not saying
I understand. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I understand previous things were approved, and like you say, violations were approved, but that doesn't mean that should continue. So as a resident of East Boston and a member of the design review committee, that is what this presentation to me. With the 5-foot setback and the triple the size of the FAR, that's what really sticks out to me. I mean, I know that Crespo Construction will go forward with their proposal as they plan and whatnot, but I'm just presenting my comments and my opinion as a member of this committee and as an East Boston resident. I mean, I understand development's going to happen. I get it. It is going to happen, but it shouldn't be excessive. There's no need for it to be excessive. You don't want to take up every square inch of green space that there is in East Boston because there's so little of it. So
I understand.
thank you for the opportunity to comment.
No, certainly. And these gentlemen and myself, we want to continue to work with you. One of the first things when they were designing this with Eric was that they did not want these to look like a box building, right? They wanted to do something unique so that they looked like three separate buildings, which are there now. Now, obviously they're bigger, but I would argue that even the buildings that are now don't really fit in with what even the code allows. So they're older, they're dated, they're small, they've got massive curb cuts, they've got front yard parking. So things that even under the code now would not be allowable or that the zoning board would frown upon. But obviously this is our first meeting. We have an abutter meeting at the end of the month, I believe. I think it's the 29th. We haven't flyered yet, but as we get closer, we will. And so this is our first meeting. So these are our first iterations, and we're going to take all these comments back and take them serious and come back out.
We have a question from, oh, sorry. There was a question from Brooke Machado in the chat asking, what is the reason for the developer to build against what the code permits in this 1F zone?
And I don't think that's necessarily the idea. It's that there's a development opportunity here. There's a housing crisis in Boston. By building what we're proposing, it allows us to, one, sort of remove the buildings that are there now. I would say they do not blend in with the newer housing stock. We're able to create new housing. We're able to create condominium units for sale, new home ownership, but also it allows us to have affordability piece, because we also know that affordable housing on site inclusionary is very important as well. So, you know, and the gentlemen are developers. That's their job. That's what they do. But we're here to listen to comments. So thank you.
I see that, Diane, you have your hand raised.
Hi, I just have a few comments. I have to laugh when you talk about affordable housing because we have a whole big, huge structure down the street of affordable housing. That's my first comment. Second comment, I agree you need to build something there. The owners, families, you know, and neglected these properties, and it really, you know, doesn't do anything to enhance our neighborhood. So I agree, you can, you know, structures, but the size that you people want to keep, you know, presenting to us are just too big. They're just enormous. I mean, we have Suffolk Downs putting 10,000 units and so forth. And they met with all the abutters and they agreed that we could have one family homes across the street. In fact, from the property that you want to develop, there's supposed to be a park, a green park across the street built. So I think you need to get your pencil sharpened and go back and come back to us with something else. That's all. Thanks.
Noah, you also have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just was wondering if, oh, maybe that's it. But if the architect could provide sections through the entire site, maybe all the way to the properties behind, just to give us that view.
I don't think we have that now, right, Eric? I mean, you're talking about the side view or something we already showed, or something
A section that, yeah, just, I mean, I can see some elevate, like I can see some terrain, I guess, here, but seeing how that the whole, it connects from one street almost to the other street, just so I could see.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we don't have that.
I don't
Yeah.
have it, but we could certainly draw it.
I understand you
Yeah.
don't have it now, and I just would, it would be helpful, I think, for me to picture how how everything interacts with the site.
Sure.
We can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Mike, you also have your hand raised?
I'm just taking myself off mute. Good evening, everyone. First things first, I'm not an abutter. If this is built as proposed, there isn't a thing about my life that will likely change as a result. But there's really a lot to unpack here. Very briefly, I would like to respond to something that Diane said in her comments with regard to affordable housing. The housing development up the block is the intent was for a mixed market of public housing and market rate housing, and I believe the market rate component got removed. So that is, strictly speaking, a development that is replacing the existing public housing development there. Legally and philosophically, we cannot describe that as affordable housing in the same context as Jeff's description about affordable units being part of this development. Two different things. If this is a home ownership thing, affordable housing is for people that earn 75% of the area median income. These are not people on public assistance or anything like that. It's the most misunderstood term that you could possibly have in a community development discussion like this. So that's just my one bit of housekeeping that I just kind of wanted to bring up. It is very difficult for anybody to defend the three buildings that are on this commingled site at this time. They're probably the three shabbiest looking residential properties on Waldemar Ave. But what I can say is that these houses and the other single family houses that surround them tell a story of the aspirational culture in the post-World War II era. There are very few single family properties in all of East Boston. This is a multi-unit community. Next door to me here on Barnes Avenue is one of the very few single family homes that was built in the second half of the 20th century, as are these three homes that are proposed to be demolished. Am I suggesting that they're historical? No. Am I suggesting that they warrant a full restoration to their original state circa 1953? No, of course not. But what I'm saying is, to lose single family homes across the hill in Orient Heights really kind of erodes the overall history of the district, of this enclave. Perhaps others will disagree, and I also recognize the need to add housing stock. I understand all of that. The abutters are going to have a whole lot more to say about the scale, the design language, and other elements of this proposed project than I can or should have. But I do worry about, you know, unique points of our design heritage in this community. I think that a single family district should probably remain a single family district, not because we're trying to exclude people, but because we're trying to preserve the vibe of the neighborhood. These homes were likely built by returning veterans from World War II, things like that. I mean, when my father was a boy, that was, the hill was an orchard and a pig farm. What story are we telling by building this project as proposed? The story that we're telling is about the profit motives of some developers. It's a different thing. And Jeff, I will chide you in closing for speaking about being allowed to build affordable units. It's mandated. It's the law. You don't represent a charity. Please don't insult our intelligence.
I didn't say that.
That you are.
I didn't say that. I said that being able to do a 15-unit project allows the developer, and he would be required. I said we would be required by the city as well. But it keeps this project to have an affordable component.
There's a legal remediation for the.
And it's something that's encouraged by these developers as well as the city of Boston. And that number has been growing. And just so you know,
as well as good.
The AMIs are varying. So I know you said this is not Section 8, or I don't know how you worded it, but it is going to be at a lower level that's set by the city, and they'll negotiate with us to bring that AMI to a level that they see fit. And that's happening throughout East Boston. And it's allowing people, but it's also allowing many people to stay in East Boston that would not otherwise be able to afford a condominium unit in new developments. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yours is a very strong opinion on that. What I will say to you, and I think that others will back me up on this, the calculus that determines AMI in this community and elsewhere in Greater Boston is among the most gerrymandered pieces of mathematics that I have ever had the misfortune to look at. I do math all day at my job. And when you exclude communities of color from the computation, you're not generating a realistic dollar value that qualifies people for AMI. That's all I have to say about it. But look at cities like Stoughton and Brockton and Fitchburg that are excluded from that. But Manchester by the Sea and other tawny communities on the North and the South Shore are included. That's math that does not benefit the people that need to benefit from it. I'm not interested in elected office or anything like that, but I have talked to my senator and my congressman about it. So it's enough. Back to mute.
We have a question from Dave in the chat asking, could Jeff or the developer give their thoughts on parking overflow onto the street?
I started to get into the Funko Pops, so I started.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. So one thing we wanted to do is have a 1-for-1 parking ratio. You don't see that on a lot of new projects, especially where you are within walking distance to a T station. The city actually would really push us against, particularly the BPDA, of having any more than 1-for-1. You know, I have been by that area a million times. There is usually more than most streets, some available parking on the street, but with these new developments, we're finding that it is not more than 1 car per condo unit. There are exceptions to the rule. When you're near a T station like this, you're definitely.
Can we have somebody mute their phones somewhere?
Yep, I've been
So-
muting people as they accidentally speak. Sorry about that, Jeff.
That's okay. So I would say we really tried to put as much parking as we could with 1-for-1. We'll certainly continue to look at that. Obviously, if the project changes, we might have more parking than we have units. So it's our starting point, but we did get to that 1-for-1 for a reason. Plus, we're also going to be restoring curb cuts that would normally be there now because there's such a wide variety up and down those 3 houses. So we would create some on-street parking that would not just be used by the owners of the building, but could be used by the general public.
Larry Venezia asked, so you proposed 5 feet of grass in the rear yard?
Yes.
I think it's talking about that setback again in the
Sure.
rear.
Sure.
See, Sean Cronin said, I have concerns that removing the hill on both sides of my property 108 will affect us in conjunction with 116.
What number was that again? I'm sorry.
Uh,
What's the address?
108?
108. Yeah. So yeah, we're not, again, we're excavating sort of in the back. We're still away from his property, but we could certainly, work with 108 to discuss our structural engineering, our excavation plan. But anytime, obviously, you're removing these houses, the houses that are there now are already dug into the ground. So we would be going in the back more, obviously, but we can certainly work with him on our structural engineering plans.
Tony, if I may, I'm actually here. Can maybe follow up to that. Yeah, so I know you're talking about in the rear. So the rear of the properties for 108 and 104 they used to share a retaining wall. Ours has been built up over the years, and I think removing one side of that retaining wall and cutting into that is going to have some implications on like the structural rear yard for our property. And then on the other side, and I'm not sure if you're aware, 116 is developing a similar condo style and is cutting into the rear yard on that side, or the hill on that side. And I think in conjunction, we'd have this weird outsetting hill for only our property now, which is currently supported by, both the surrounding properties. And that's where I have a concern.
So why don't we why don't we have our civil engineer first take a look at that, just on both sides, obviously not 116, but on our side and the other side of ours. And that way we can have sort of a plan in place when we come back, or when we have our butter meeting.
Obviously, our retaining wall isn't designed to withhold the entirety of the back hill.
No, but we would, obviously, it would be our, job to put up whatever has to and do it safely and pay for all of the costs along with it. But I understand what you're saying.
Okay, we have another question from Dave asking, Jeff, do you believe any person who grew up in this area could afford one of these new units?
I don't know. They are market rate. We'll see what the market yields, but some of them, if this particular project went forward and it does have an affordable housing component, I would say absolutely. But this is not an all affordable project. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. These are going to be condominium units and they're going to be market rate units.
I don't see any more comments coming in.
Oh, I want to speak.
Okay.
We sound like a broken record every time a developer comes across our landscape. I want to reiterate that just because the current zoning law stands, it's only permitted for 1 and 2 families in this. All the larger buildings are all, for the most part, grandfathered in. So, we're comparing apples and oranges when you say, well, diagonally across the street, there's a large building and, other areas of Waldemar are some are larger. Suffice it to say, what is there now probably should be replaced with what is there now. So if it's a 1 family, just replace a 1 family at max 2. But to go forward and feel like you're entitled to come up with 15 units to replace 3 1 families, if that's what it is, I think it's 3 1 families, is a bit excessive and imposing, and not to say a feeling of entitlement. I think, you have to go back to the drawing board, respect the abutters, because if they were to appeal this, there's no hardship here. And I believe that the courts would side with the abutters, as they have been routinely. So I just think it's the same old game here. And, we're going to stand and try to defend our neighborhood and our property. I mean, I don't want somebody to come in and build something of 15 units next to me. It denigrates my property. Why should I want to live next door to 15 units and 30 parking spaces total, which is likely going to happen? So, I mean, I just think the neighborhood should coalesce, stick together, and stand for the zoning. And there was one other point I wanted to make, but I'm forgetting what it is, so I'll have to come back. Oh, brother. The affordability piece. So affordable housing is not housing that should start in Boston looking at, say, 60 or 80,000 to 120,000. I think we have 2 terms here. We're calling it affordability, which is not really affordable to most people in East Boston. It's maybe affordable to the newcomers, but it's not truly affordable. So, I don't hear anyone speaking about truly affordable, which eliminates displacement in our community. And that's what's happening. And so I think that's problematic for us. I mean, we're looking at gentrification, and it's not right to, have developers say, well, we think, zoning should be this. No, the zoning is what is the zoning. And that's what stands. So it's too bad that you have to, live within the zoning, but that's what we would all require of this developer and any other developers. I think you're getting away with a lot in the other neighborhoods, but this neighborhood is zoned in a special way, and I think we want to keep it that way. So that's all I have to say.
Sure. Just in closing, I would say I can appreciate that. And it is a 1F 4,000. And it happens, just to the left of our small one family is a 3-unit building. And I know there are multiple one families in the area. So I think it would be reasonable. There's a apartment complex across the street. And I know that was built years ago, but when someone says you should be looking at the zoning in the area and, it's zoned as a 1 and there's 1s around you, that's true. There's also 2s, there's also 3s, there's also new developments, there's also a 16-unit development. So I think that's where developer starts to look at, we want to build a certain quality housing. We want it to be higher end and good material. We do, it is an affordable component, whether or not folks have concerns about AMIs. I mean, we try our best to meet those requirements, but that's more of a city issue or a state issue. If folks want to see more affordability, but I can tell you I represent both the East Boston CDC as well as the neighborhood of affordable housing, and the one overarching theme I hear from both is that there's just constant applications for new housing. And with these condominium developments, I can tell you that having an affordable set unit where that condo cannot be sold, that's deed restricted, gives somebody an opportunity, that works in East Boston or lives in East Boston to actually afford to buy one of these newer buildings. So I would argue it's a good thing, and it does create some affordable housing in the areas. Thank you.
Well, we're looking at Suffolk Downs with potentially 10,000 units. So I think if we want to talk about affordability, we'll look over there. I mean, this is just kind of the biggest joke that's going. And sadly, it's not respected. I think if you're going to look at the tonier neighborhoods, you wouldn't get away with this in a heartbeat. You wouldn't be going to Wellesley and Newton and wherever, Manchester by the Sea, and proposing this stuff and having a zoning board approve it. It's outrageous what the city of Boston's allowing. So it's forcing people to appeal, and they're winning on appeal. So.
I didn't see any other questions come up.
Have all the questions in the chat been answered?
Yeah, there was one from Diane, but I think she was talking about the existing properties, asking, isn't that house a 2-family with an illegal basement? I think that was in regards to the current property.
It's assessed as a 3 on the left. You can look it up in the city of Boston. Well, I don't know how it's used, but it is assessed as a 3-family.
I don't see any additional comments or questions coming in. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to ask, or any comments before we close out?
Well, I think we should give the developer a chance to come back and see if they want to improve their project. But I think the general consensus that I'm hearing is it's really not acceptable as proposed. So
We'll take the feedback and try to work on sharpening our pencils, and we have an abutter meeting at the end of the month. We'll see what we can come up with.
All right, and I'll clean up my notes and send them out as like a meeting recap, and I'll provide them to you too, Jeff, so that you have them.
Thank you.
Brooke was asking, when is the abutters meeting?
I believe I think the mayor's office set it for the 29th at 7, but we'll have it flyer of the neighborhood, of the abutters.
are you going to flyer Faywood also?
So was that Gail? They give us a map. I know it includes Faywood, the back buildings. I don't know the exact cutoff of the jurisdiction, but absolutely.
But anybody behind these buildings would have to be notified.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, it sounds like we're all set. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you everyone for participating tonight. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Tony.